it is hardly necessary for me to say that all great religions are founded upon the same experience of the unity of life, which is the divine ground of existence. In other words, Judaism and Christianity, Hinduism and Buddhism, Islam and Zoroastrianism are all founded on the same peak of spiritual experience called samadhi. When we have attained some glimpse of this high peak, that is the unity of life, there is no difference between a Hindu and a Buddhist, a Christian and a Muslim. It is all the same. It is good to remember that the etymological meaning of the word religion is to bind together, ligare, ligature. We have completely forgotten, because we have always been using religion to separate people. He belongs to the Buddhist tradition, Tim belongs to the Shiva tradition, so why should they ever agree? Now, this is the way we have been going about it, and one of the medieval mystics of India, Kabir, who was claimed both by the Muslims to be their own and by the Hindus to be their own, he says in a very, to use a modern phrase, uptight moment, he says, Lord, I would like to come to you, but the obstacles on my way are many. Temples, churches, synagogues. Sometimes these are the obstacles, because they try to divide people. And it almost comes as a refreshing discovery when we remind ourselves the purpose of religion is to unite people. Everywhere, when the parents and the children live together in harmony, they are being religious. It doesn't mean that they have to go to church. It doesn't mean that they have to count the rosary. If the parents and the children put each other first, live together in love and harmony at home, in the right sense of the word, it is a very religious home. Similarly, in a home where husband and wife put each other's welfare first, that is a religious partnership, a spiritual partnership, where, as Jesus would say, you forgive your enemy and you bless him who curses you. That is the greatest religious order. This is the great religious order to which you and I can belong without being initiated, without having to wear saffron robes or white cassocks or have a tonsure on your head or a clean shave. We don't have to undergo all this, provided we are prepared to love our enemy. In beginning this great Western manual of spiritualism, I would like to draw your attention to the practical emphasis of being like Jesus. If you want to be deeply spiritual, you have to walk in the footsteps of Jesus, and Thomas à Kempis gives us in glorious language how we can learn to do it. The first book, Admonitions, the right emphasis, you see. Admonitions useful for a spiritual life. He is not interested in winning friends and influencing people. He is interested in telling us how to attain this divine unity that is the basis of all life. Chapter 1 of the Imitation of Christ, Contempt of all the vanities of the world. We have to remember here that some of the expressions that are being used here may sound a little strong on our ears, a little strange to our ears, but many of these words have undergone considerable change of meaning since the 15th century. This is also partly written in the light of the monastic tradition, where they have a very healthy pity for us who are caught in the world. But you and I should not use words like contempt of the world. We say detachment from the world. You and I should not say that I am God. We say we are children of God. He is our Father, we are the children. He is the master, we are the servants. If we try to remember, therefore, that sometimes these words have to be applied very carefully and very skillfully to our own condition, I don't think we would be offending people by saying we are leading the spiritual life, so we have contempt for the whole world. He that followeth me walketh not in darkness, saith the Lord. Right from the beginning, we are told that we have to carry out in our personal life the spiritual advice given by Jesus the Christ. He that followeth me walketh not in darkness, saith the Lord. These are the words of Christ by which we are admonished how we ought to imitate his life and manners if we will be truly enlightened and be delivered from all blindness of heart. I like to recall in this connection the words of St. Paul, which mean a good deal to me because it conveys the exact concept of nirvana. St. Paul, before he attained illumination, was a far from lovable character. When he was Saul of Tarsus, his heart was consumed by hatred, by violence, and there are many stories about how bitter he was about Jesus the Christ because of his divinity, of his utter selflessness. And even in modern life, we shall find that when we find an utterly selfless man, he raises all kinds of upsetting questions in us. I know some of my old friends who would not go to a spiritual gathering for a very honest reason: we might be converted. They know themselves very well, and they are so aware that words of tremendous appeal coming from the heart of Jesus might touch a deep spring and release the perennial love that has been wanting to come into their life from the deepest levels. Saul of Tarsus, one day he was walking on the road to Damascus. I wish we had more details about that incident. It would have been a very dramatic one. He was just walking along, seething with resentment. Suddenly, the grace of the Lord descended upon him, and he arose from this cataclysm of consciousness. No longer Saul had been liquidated. The ego had been completely dissolved. He rose up, not I, but Christ liveth in me. Here we have the secret. In order to be like Jesus, we don't have to be a carpenter's son. I remember being introduced to a young man who wouldn't tell me much about himself, and when my curiosity was roused, I said, "Who are you?" He said, "I'm a carpenter's son." Now, just being a carpenter's son doesn't make you illumined. And it is possible to be illumined being an electrician's son. being anybody's son, provided the ego is dissolved. And when we were on the Blue Mountain, we went to a theosophical meeting at the home of a British lady who used to give us high English tea. And the attendance was always good. So on that occasion, we had the only Hindu hippie we had ever run into, a young fellow from North India who had a beautiful beard. There was an Australian member of the Theosophical Society who had come, and he was staring at our friend with such admiration that I said, "What's the matter?" Oh, he says, "He looks just like Jesus." It was my unpleasant duty to tell him that it requires much more to look like Jesus. In order to be like Jesus, we have to dissolve our ego, eliminate our I, me and mine, remove all selfishness and all separateness from our heart. Once we can do this, whatever appearance we have, whatever country we come from, we are Christ-centered. Let therefore our chiefest endeavor be to meditate upon the life of Jesus Christ. The doctrine of Christ exceedeth all the doctrines of holy men, and he that hath the Spirit will find therein a hidden manna. This word manna in Sanskrit is called amrit. Amrit, mriti, to die. Amrit, that makes you undying. In samadhi, it is this immortal elixir that is given to us by the Lord. In the early days, it is true, most of the spiritual disciplines are undertaken by our own constant, unremitting effort. But in the final climax of samadhi, the Lord gives us amrit, the immortal elixir, which quietly disposes of the old ego, writes a very apt epitaph, and removes it from our consciousness. But it falleth out that many who often hear the gospel of Christ are yet but little affected, because they are void of the Spirit of Christ. But whosoever would fully and feelingly understand the words of Christ must endeavor to conform his life wholly to the life of Christ. This is the imponderable thing about grace, that it knows no rhyme, it knows no reason. There have been people of great intellectual attainments who have listened to Ramana Maharshi, who have listened to Sri Ramakrishna, come with great respect for them, but with no understanding of what it is all about. Unless there is a little door open somewhere into your deeper consciousness, all the moving spiritual eloquence of the great mystics does not seem to enter into our heart. People who have led a very upright life, who have dotted their I's and dashed their T's all the time, done everything that they never expected them to do, lived in the order of respectability. Such people have been to ashrams, have been to great mystics, and as respectability demands, have given them all their tributes and come out and said, "What's he talking about?" See, this is a strange paradox, whereas people who have caused great trouble to themselves and to society, which is not a necessary qualification for leading the spiritual life, people who often have made serious mistakes in life and become embittered and seethe with resentment and hostility at those around them, they've gone in and found the words coming from this deeper consciousness such a soothing balm that their wounds have healed and they've come out saying, this is what we have been looking for. There have also been those who have tasted success, made a lot of money, enjoyed prestige and power, and realized that this is all a will-o'-the-wisp that promises you joy and security and leaves you more joyless and more insecure. Such people also, when they listen to the words of great teachers like Jesus or the Buddha, they absorb everything and immediately they are able to turn over a new leaf with their eyes on the shining goal, that is the Lord. If thou didst know the whole Bible by heart and the sayings of all the philosophers, what would all that profit thee without the love of God and without His grace? Vanity of vanities, and all is vanity. Degrees, diplomas, libraries, seminars, vanity of vanities, all is vanity, except to love God and to serve Him only. Wonderful words. To love God, in the language of Jesus, means love Him with all your heart and all your mind and all your strength and all your spirit. Things are not to be loved. The Christian mystics will say over and over again, when you love things, you cannot use them wisely. And this is why we have to recall our love from things, money, material possessions. It is vanity to follow the desires of the flesh and to labor for that for which thou must afterwards suffer grievous punishment. It's all such practical counseling. This is again, as I said, to be interpreted in our domestic context, because we are not monks, we are not members of the monastic order, we are ordinary people living in the world with our families, with our friends, and there is a certain amount of latitude that is granted to us to enjoy the good things of life within moderation, within normal limits of temperance. When we are cautioned not to go after the vanities of the flesh, we can translate it into the language of physicians today who tell us, don't overeat. It makes the body susceptible to all kinds of ailments. And this is the application, therefore, of Thomas A. Kempis' words. Be moderate, be temperate in eating, which in the Sanskrit sense means in every sensory enjoyment. All men naturally desire to know, but what availeth knowledge without the fear of God? We need not be too much taken aback on coming across expressions like fear of God. It is the beginning of wisdom. We fear the law of gravity. That's why we don't try to jump off the campanile. Fear in the sense of scrupulously respecting the operation of a law. And fear of the Lord means wholesome respect of the fundamental law that if I live for all of you, I flourish and you flourish. If I live only for myself, I do not flourish, and the chances are that the people around me also won't be allowed to flourish. Thomas A. Kempis begins by defining what real education is, which was defined long, long ago by Socrates. If I can try a little borrowed Greek, gnotise autan. It's the true Hellenic accent. Which means know thyself. Tennyson, drawing upon the same source of inspiration as Socrates, said, self-knowledge, self-reverence, self-control. These three alone lead man to sovereign power. Our idea of education is knowing everything outside, which has a place, but it is more important to know myself for you to know yourself. And it is of this knowledge that Socrates would say, know thyself. Surely a humble husbandman that serveth God is better than a proud philosopher that neglecting himself laboureth to understand the course of the heavens. Whoso knoweth himself well groweth more mean in his own conceit and delighteth not in the praises of men. Some of these expressions are very strange to us. Mean in our own conceit refers to not dwelling upon oneself at all, not thinking oneself in any way superior to those around us. If I understand all things in the world and were not in charity, what would that help me in the sight of God, who will judge me according to my deeds? Now here again expressions like God judging us. We don't have to wait for doomsday. It's going on right now. In every one of us, in every cell of our being, there is this divine accountant. He's written into every cell of our being. And the moment I think a selfish thought, in every cell a minus sign is given. And the moment I think a selfless thought, a plus sign is immediately given. In other words, even one little selfish thought can take away a little from our physical health, our emotional security, our intellectual capacity. Happy is he whom truth by itself doth teach, not by figures and words that pass away, but as it is in itself. That's a marvelous sentence, because it is good to have a trained intellect, and it is good to labor hard to understand things, to study things. But as our meditation deepens, and as we delve deep into some of these richer realms of consciousness, it is extremely gratifying when knowledge comes to us direct, not flowing circuitously zigzag through intellectual ways. The intellectual ways are like the rivers on the Himalayas. They wind round and round, they don't come straight. But intuition is called direct perception, without the intervention of the intellect, without the intervention of the senses. And the intellect is to be used for checking the intuition that comes direct. Consider the lively examples of the Holy Fathers, in whom true perfection and religion shine, and thou shalt see how little it is, and almost nothing which we do now in these days. I need hardly mention that this book is the product of a monastic order, and the man whose name the book carries as the author is a distinguished monk, Thomas à Kempis. It is always good for us to respect members of the monastic order. In India, even the people in the highest positions They always show great respect to members of the monastic order because they have renounced everything in the world to follow the spiritual life. But this does not mean that we householders cannot lead the spiritual life. Nor does it mean that illumination cannot come except in the monastic order. Oh, how strict and self-renouncing a life. Strict in the sense of discipline. I too was under the impression, before I took to meditation, as many of you must have been under the impression or are still, that the way to freedom lies through indiscipline. This appeals so much to the intellect, and being somewhat of this category in my earlier days, when I began to write rather powerful authors who said, fling yourself, throw yourself into any opportunity without considering the right or wrong, and if it hurts somebody, that's his funeral. Many of us can therefore understand this very strong position taken by the mystics who will say, there is no harm in indulging your senses except you're going to be a slave. This is the point that they are making. They are not saying that the devil is going to get hold of you and put you between brimstone and fire, so that you can be barbecued and made the food of the devil. This is all just, figurative language which we shouldn't take seriously. There is no need to get agitated saying, I don't believe in all this, therefore I don't believe in God. If we really want freedom, it is through discipline. My grandmother, who was far from being a moralist, she used to tell me, she said, I can understand your objecting to discipline if it is imposed from outside. But she said, I can never understand your objection to imposing discipline upon yourself. On the spiritual path, disciplines are not imposed by the legislature or by the Supreme Court, who says you indulge your senses and we are going to put you in jail for 5 years or $5,000 fine or both. So there is no law to this effect except the law that is inscribed in the cells of our being, where the eternal judge and the jury and the executioner are all one, my real self. When I try to impose disciplines upon myself, there is enjoyment in it, exhilaration in it, because it is not imposed from outside. When my grandmother put it this way, I said, if you put it this way, I can understand, I can appreciate, I can even undergo. In the day they labored, and in the night they attended to continual prayer. Although when they labored also, they ceased not from mental prayer. They spend all their time with profit. It's a marvelous statement. We are spending all our time with losses, more losses, and still more losses, which we call making money, accumulating possessions. And this is actually loss. What is really gain is what we contribute to others, to our parents, to our partner, to our children, to our friends, and as Jesus adds, to our enemy. When somebody asks you, how wealthy are you? The right answer is, what I have been enabled through the grace of the Lord to contribute to other people's life. That is my wealth, what I have contributed to my own should never be included in the accounts. There is a delightful book by a European physician, Axel Munthe. It's called The Story of San Michel. I read it many years ago. It's a very delightful book in which he narrates a number of interesting anecdotes which I recall even after so many years. When you have great love for even an animal, it immediately responds. As we all know, with dogs or cats or horses or elephants. He talks about a little old lady who for some reason had a big old bear as her pet. And probably for reasons of compensation, I suppose. And she used to think more of the bear than of herself. Always was concerned about the bear, so that the bear behaved like a little child in her home, just like a little child waiting for her, just wanting to be with her. And one day, she had gone out somewhere in a car near a neighboring forest, and she saw her bear wandering there, which she had tied at home. She got very annoyed. Wild animals would have attacked you. People might have shot you. How did you escape from there? How did you come all the way? She went to this bear and hit him with a parasol and caught hold of him by his ear and dragged him along, and he was just looking aghast, big burly Smoky, following a little lady who was frail and weak, and people were just aghast and saying, look at that big old Smoky following this little lady like this. And she brought him home just by his ear. And as soon as she entered, there was her bear, and she fainted. This is one of the delightful stories he narrates, and he was very good to birds, even though he was a doctor. Whenever he saw a bird wounded, he would always nurse it. And there were many birds he healed. And he says, in a very delightful fantasy, after death, he dreams that he is before the eternal tribunal, being judged. There are all kinds of charges against him, some of which he cannot deny. So he really gets very nervous. And he is afraid that the judge is not only going to sentence him, but add some strong remarks too. And just then, a number of birds fly in. And the swallow says, when my wing was hurt, he healed me. The parrot comes and says, when my leg was broken, he healed me. The owl comes and says, I couldn't sleep. He never could get a hard day's sleep. And he gave me sedatives and he made me sleep well during the day. And the Lord is so pleased, that he says, whatever offenses you have committed are all forgiven. Come and be with me. It's a beautiful book, The Story of San Michel. This is how we can make use of our time, even by reading some of these great adventures in the elevation of consciousness, which are very delightfully written. The mystics are very great writers. Some of the greatest writers in the world, poets, musicians, painters, have had a mystical experience. They renounced, these are glorious words, they renounced all riches, all dignities,
all honors. Now, why do I want honor when the source of all honor is in me? Why do you want any outside status symbol when the supreme status symbol, the Lord, is within you? And these are questions that Thomas à Kempis is asking to free us from our dependence upon external symbols. They desire to have nothing which appertain to the world, nothing that perisheth, nothing belongs to us here. They scarce took things necessary for the sustenance of life. They grieve to serve their bodies even in necessity. This is very much the ascetic tradition to which fortunately you and I do not belong. Therefore, they were poor in earthly things, but very rich in grace and virtues. And we are poor in grace and virtues, very, very rich in earthly things. Calories. Outwardly, they were destitute, but inwardly, they were refreshed with grace and divine consolation. They were strangers to the world, but neat and familiar friends of God. They seemed to themselves as nothing, and to this present world despicable. But they were precious and beloved in the eyes of God. These are very stringent comments upon our modern criteria. How much are you worth? Oh, $1.5 million. The mystic would say, 1.5 million times you've repeated the mantra. And the man says, no, this is what I have in the bank. Oh, I didn't ask about that. That's not worth. That is neither worth nor merit nor awareness. Oh, how great was the fervor of all religious persons in the beginning of their holy institution. When Jesus was with us, when the Buddha was with us, how fervent were people around Jesus, around the Buddha. How great was their devotion to prayer. What ambition to excel others in virtue. Oh, the lukewarmness and negligence of our times. The 20th century has been called the age of anxiety by Auden. It has been called Kali Yuga. Here is another equally interesting term, lukewarm age. Just no sincerity, no warmth, no enthusiasm about anything. All right, if that is so, I'll do. Oh, the lukewarmness and negligence of our times, that we so quickly decline from the ancient fervor and are come to that pass that very sloth and lukewarmness of spirit maketh our own life tedious unto us. So perfect a description of our modern times, when in spite of all the material comforts we have, life has become dull, drab, dreary, wherever you go. Because we are living on the physical level, on the egoistic level, on the separatist level. And would to God the desire to grow in virtues did not wholly sleep in thee, who hast often seen the many examples of devout and religious persons. Daily ought we to renew our purposes and to stir up ourselves to greater fervor, as though this were the first day of our conversion. Oh, wonderful words. The secret of success in every field lies in enthusiasm. And there are a few remarkable people in every country, in every little city, where you will find they can get enthusiastic. This is access to a deeper level of consciousness. And you'll find everywhere a large number say, what does it matter? This way, that way, everything is the same way. These are the people who haven't access even to their surface level of consciousness.
Enthusiasm is most important of the spiritual life. And without enthusiasm, it's not possible for anybody to lead the spiritual life, even after so many years of meditation. When it should have
We
become
must
stable.
diligently search into and set in order
Exactly.
both the outward
Every
and
now
the
and
inward
then
man,
I tell Christine,
because both of
there's
them are of
nothing like
importance
meditation
to our
on that.
progress in godliness. That's again a
This is
very
about the
pregnant
1000th
sentence.
time.
It
I
is
tell
good
her, but
to
immediately
make
I
changes
tell
in
her,
our diet,
she too responds and says,
eat
yes,
what is
there
nourishing,
nothing like meditation.
eat temperately, to have regular exercise,
And this is what I do to you every day.
to go to sleep adequately,
Try
and
to
to give our
convey
very best to our
my
work.
enthusiasm
But
for the
these outward changes
limitless
must
love
be
that is in
accompanied
us,
by
which
a
will
consistent attempt
never allow us
to purify
inflict any
consciousness,
suffering
to reduce
anybody,
selfishness,
on any
and
family,
to find the
on
unity
any
that
race,
underlies all
on any
life.
community.
These should go hand in hand and together, and spiritual development is permanent in the case of people who try to make these changes outwardly
and wisdom
and
that
draw
comes
strength
with this
from the
love
changes that they are making
to
within.
live always
If thou
in
canst
harmony
not continually
with this
recollect
unity
thyself,
of life,
yet
which
do
is
it sometimes,
the
at the least once a day,
of existence.
namely in the morning
daily
or at
ought
night.
to renew our purposes
This word recollecting
and
is
to stir
especially
out the greater
meaningful
fervor.
in Christian mysticism.
Many of our friends for
It is the opposite of
have been
scattering.
meditating with us
We are
for a
often
number of years.
scatter-minded,
It is
attending
when
to
you get into
distractions,
deeper levels of meditation,
going from
there are all
one
kinds
flower
of
to another,
difficulties.
like a
Having
butterfly
had the privilege
sipping honey
of being
from
associated
numerous flowers.
with hundreds and
And
hundreds of people.
Once in a day at least,
I
Thomas
get
A.
this
Kempis
crying.
implores us
Somebody tells me,
to recollect all our energies, to bring together all our mental resources. And this is
in
what
my
we do
language
in the
means
practice of
stagnant.
meditation. When I say bring your mind
You
back
just
every
got
time
into
it
some
wanders away
backwater,
to the words of the
and
prayer
you're
of St.
staying
Francis
put
of
there, you
Assisi,
stopped sailing.
we are
The mood
recollecting
you sailed,
our energies.
thrown the
And
oars
every
out,
day in your
and
meditation,
stopped the engine,
when you
and you're
recollect
lying
your
down
energies,
there
when you
saying,
unify your mental
I have
resources,
reached harbor.
the great day will come.
Now when
Through the
somebody
grace of the
who is
Lord,
meditating
when you will find
sincerely,
a united mind
systematically,
and a
and with
united
sustained
consciousness
enthusiasm,
in which the Lord
Help
can
me.
reveal himself.
mourning and groaning,
Seek a convenient time
trouble,
to retire into
trouble,
thyself
trouble, difficulties,
and meditate
problems,
often
and,
upon God.
I usually say, now you're talking.
This could have easily been
Now you're really going
second
ahead.
paragraph in the Little
Because
Lamp, any issue. And
every time
Thomas
we
A.
change
Kempis
our level of
speaking from
consciousness,
personal
it's
experience
like
when he says,
a child
seek a
learning to walk.
convenient time to
The
retire
purpose
into
of just
thyself.
men
Don't be going out all the
depends
time.
not upon their own
I
wisdom,
must grab happiness.
but upon God's grace,
I must purchase joy.
on whom they always rely
I must hold
for
security.
whatsoever they take in hand.
Thomas A. Kempis says, you just
This is
forget
perhaps
about joy,
the
and
most
forget about security,
wonderful
and forget
experience
about
on the
all
spiritual
these,
path,
and
that after
retire
years
into
of
thyself.
striving,
because
seeming to get nowhere,
the more you go
seeming
out
to
after
batter
them,
our head against
the
a
more
brick wall,
away you're going from them.
slowly,
He strikes the keynote,
in the circumstances in our life,
which is
we
the
begin to see
sum and substance of the perennial
a
philosophy,
hidden hand
that the kingdom
of the Lord within,
lies within.
trying
We
to
hear
strike at
every
our hand
day.
whenever we
Yes.
try to cling to anything.
It never
It's one of the
enters our
most
consciousness
satisfying
that
and
what
one of the
Jesus
most
is saying
agonizing
is,
experiences in life.
You don't have to go
For a
abroad
long time when you take to the spiritual path,
don't have to
you
keep
try to get
traveling.
attached to something,
from bank to bank,
and
From
it
bar to
hurts so
bar,
much that you let
from
it
theater
go.
to theater, from
You try
campus
to
to
cling to
campus,
somebody
to find
obsessively.
what is already
You get
within you.
hit and you let the clutch go.
If thou wilt withdraw
And for a
thyself
long
from
time, you
speaking
bear a
vain,
grudge against the Lord.
and
Every
from
time I
gadding
try to
idle,
get secure, you hit my...
as
Well,
also
who
from
called you, Lord?
hearkening after novelties and rumors,
And
Thou shalt
G.K.
find
Chesterton
leisure
has a
enough
story called The Hammer of
suitable
God.
for meditation always.
But
when this happens
It's
many,
difficult
many
to
times,
believe, that
over a long
this
period,
wasn't written this
you
morning.
say, that's the game, is it?
Because this is
Every
where we
time
go and
I'm
talk
going
to
to
people,
be
good people,
trapped,
cultured people,
you come after me with such
who will
love
now say, yes, we are beginning
that
to
you
appreciate
hurt
that
me,
meditation
so
is
that
very
I may not be
helpful.
trapped.
But
Once this
how do you
metamorphosis
expect
has
us to
taken
meditate?
place,
We don't have time.
fear of
We
blame
read
is gone.
books. Then
Fear of
we have
being
to deliver
enslaved
many
in selfish
lectures,
attachments is gone.
and we have to go
Fear
after
of sense
novelty.
cravings is gone because
We
you
want to
know
be in
now
the fashion,
that
in the swim of fashion.
if you
We want to be
try
the glass and the mirror of fashion.
unwittingly
As Sandra put it.
to get into a
And
trap, there
there
is
is
always
nobody
somebody
on earth
outside
who doesn't
to
have
hit you
time for
hard
meditation. So
so
please
that
don't let
you may not
anyone
get into the
tell you
trap.
that they don't have time for meditation. If
For
only
man
we
purposes,
could
but God
curtail
disposes. Neither is the
most
way
of
of
the
man
detrimental
himself.
activities,
In everything
which only
we are
make
in
us
the hands.
insecure,
And
which only make
it
us
is
more
this complete
in
trust
tumult,
that
all
enables
of us
us
would find
to be free
more
from
time
fear
for
and to be
meditation,
full of love.
which will bring us sound health, unshaken security, a lucid intellect, and release all our creative resources into full play for the service of those around us, and give us an unbroken awareness that you and I are not we, but you and I are one. It is easier for a man to keep at home than to keep himself well when he is abroad. Our home is really a good place to return to. We always say, well, where do you want to go for a vacation? Scandinavia or Madagascar or Morocco? Now, if you ask a mystic, oh, vacation, home. It is being out of home for them that is turmoil. John Donne, the mystical poet of medieval England, says in beautiful words, be thine own home and dwell in it. Don't try to find your home in the bank, in the restaurant, in the football ground, in the swimming pool. That's not our home. Be thine own home and therein dwell. Oh, how great peace and quietness should he possess that would cut off all vain anxiety and think only upon divine things, and such are profitable for his soul, and would place all his confidence in God. One of the corrosives of our modern age in our consciousness is constant worry. Will this go as I want, or will this go as my neighbor wants? Constant worry, will I succeed in this, will I fail in this, or will he succeed in that, or will he fail in this? This is impossible. And it is said that the person who says it is impossible is usually interrupted by somebody doing it. If thou desirest true contrition of heart, enter into thy secret chamber and shut out the tumult of the world, as it is written, in your chambers be ye grieved. In thy chamber thou shalt find what abroad thou shalt too often lose. In the Katha Upanishad, there is a splendid paragraph where the illustrious sage, after whom it is named, Katha, has been wandering all over the country looking for the secret of joy, for the secret of security, for the secret of love and wisdom in the external world. After considerable experimentation, he has come to the conclusion that it is not to be found outside anywhere, which is a conclusion that all of us too can reach with adequate experimentation in the external world. Then the sage, having come to the end of his tether, comes back and sits down, and he's trying to ask himself, where could the source of joy, the source of security, called the Lord be, if he is not in the external world? You may remember Einstein's childlike answer when he was asked, how did you discover the law of relativity? He said, by questioning an axiom. This is what Kata is going to do now. He questions the axiom. If the Lord is not out in the external world, there is only one place he can be in, and he opens the doors of his consciousness, looks in and says, got you. That's where you are hiding all the time. This is very much what we shall find in the depths of meditation as we begin to descend deeper and deeper into our own consciousness. The same Upanishad says, characteristically enough, that the Lord has played a very loving joke on us, which is in Sanskrit called Leela, the game of the Lord. When he created us, he turned all our senses outwards. The fundamental exercise in meditation, which in Catholic mysticism they call recollection, is recalling all these vital energies from outside and unifying them and turning them inside. This is the essential process for a long, long time in meditation. Recall of our attention, our awareness, our love, our creativity, which is all ebbing out into the external world. And when I suggest that we memorize the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi and go through the whole prayer as slowly as possible, letting each word drop like a jewel into our consciousness, the principle is to bring our attention more and more on the words of the prayer. For example, when St. Francis says, Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. We shall find over a long period that the words have come to mean so much to us and entered so deep into our consciousness that the time comes when our concentration is so complete, not only on the surface level, but on the pre-conscious level, on the unconscious level, that even the planes zooming in the sky, we do not hear at all. There they are, zooming. The cars roaring up and down the street, they are roaring, but we don't hear. The chair on which we sit is not felt, and we have risen above physical consciousness. Now, this is the experience that comes over a long period in the practice of meditation, which is a very difficult but very delightful exercise in increasing concentration. It is better for a man to live privately and to take care of himself than to neglect his soul, though he could work wonders in the world. For who is he that hath all things according to his mind? Neither I, nor thou, nor any man upon earth. There is none in this world, even though he be king or bishop. There is some dry humor there, you know.
without some tribulation or perplexity. Who is then in the best case? Even he who is able to suffer something for God. That is the person whom we really should envy, whom we should admire. Somebody who will say, I don't mind suffering. I don't mind foregoing my desires. I don't mind being frustrated and having unsatisfied longings if I can contribute in however small a way to the welfare of those around me. And Thomas A. Kempis says, that person is to be envied because his life itself will become a shining example to everyone around him by the selfless manner in which he is able to forget his own personal desires, his own personal profit in the service of others. This is not at all pleasant, let us not be under the impression that it was pleasant for Mahatma Gandhi or it is pleasant for anybody. This is awfully hard. Many weak and infirm persons say, see, the description is so personal. Many weak and infirm persons say, behold, what a happy life such a person leads, such one leads. How wealthy, how great is he, in what power and dignity. But lift up thine eyes to the riches of heaven, and thou shalt see that all the goods of this life are nothing to be accounted of. We have only to go into the presence of a person like Mahatma Gandhi, whose material possessions amounted to $2, and who can be called legitimately the richest man in modern history, because he donated joy and security and selfless service to millions and millions of people around him, so that one may say the 20th century is not likely to be recorded by historians as the nuclear age, but as the age of Gandhi, because he shines like a beacon to all humanity, which is looking for such a light to guide its erring feet. But lift up thine eyes to the riches of heaven that are within, and thou shalt see that all the goods of this life are nothing to be accounted of. They are very uncertain and rather burdensome than otherwise, because they are never possessed without anxiety and fear. This is why Jesus calls it the kingdom of heaven that is within. Man's happiness consisteth not in having abundance of temporal goods, but a moderate portion is sufficient for him. Whereas the saints of God and all the devout friends of Christ regardeth not those things which please the flesh, nor those which flourished in this life, but longed after the everlasting riches with their whole hope and earnest intention. Their whole desire was carried upward to things durable and invisible, that the desire of things visible might not draw them to things below. That's also a very practical sentence. Desire is power, and if anyone who calls himself an atheist or an agnostic says he doesn't believe in prayer, please remind him that every deep desire is a prayer. See, the moment you have a deep desire, it drives you into action. And this is what the mystic says, the Lord is answering the prayer from within. Every deep desire is a prayer. And usually our vital capacity for desire is vociferously wasted in 101 meaningless little cravings. When we recall our vital energy from these sensory cravings, from these selfish desires, and unify them through the practice of meditation, then we are able to use this tremendous instrument for moving us closer to the Lord of love, who is our real self. O my brother, lose not thy confidence of making progress in godliness. There is yet time, the hour is not yet past. Why wilt thou defer thy good purpose from day to day? He's almost now beginning to read our thoughts, because many good people say, yes, meditation is very good. In fact, I'm going to take to it too, maybe after 5 years. I've heard many people, both in India and America, expressing great appreciation for meditation and saying that after a while, when the time is ripe, when the moment is auspicious, we are going to take to meditation. Thomas A. Kempis talks like Sri Ramakrishna by telling us, now or never. Don't postpone, because postponement will make you even less and less resolute. Whatever the difficulties, whatever the unfavorable factors, we can start our spiritual life today, and even though we may have many handicaps, the grace of the Lord will enable us to overcome these handicaps in course of time. When thou art ill at ease and much trouble, then is the time to begin. See how practical. When thou art ill at ease and much trouble, then is the time of deserving best. Thou must pass through fire and water before thou come to the place of refreshing. This is another way of describing the challenge of meditation, of passing through many, many ordeals before we can come to the supreme goal. On the meditation path, the ordeal, let me assure you, is not make-believe. It is real fire, burning, blazing fire, which will scald you even before you go near it. Thomas A. Kempis says, you have to go through this fire, which will reduce your ego to ashes. Then you will come to the place of refreshing. He'll say, nobody's forcing you. I somehow respond very much to this appeal rather than having somebody prod me who says, you can't turn back, you have to go. If we want abiding joy, we want unshaken security, and if we want to live with all our resources harnessed for the welfare of those around us, we have to go through the fire that will reduce our ego to ashes. Unless thou dost earnestly force thyself, thou shalt never get the victory over sin. And Thomas A. Kempis also says, there is no one to push you except yourself. Instead of pushing others by some manual dexterity, learn to push yourself through this ordeal which will reduce yourself into ashes, and then you will come to the place of refreshing. Very quickly, there will be an end of thee. Look, what will become of thee in another world? He's talking personally, he's not making a general statement, ye people. He says, you. Today the man is here, tomorrow he is gone. And when he is out of sight, quickly also is he out of mind. Oh, the stupidity and hardness of man's heart, which thinketh only upon the present, and doth not rather care for what is to come. Thou oughtest so to order thyself in all thy thoughts and actions, as if today thou wert about to die. That's a beautiful sentence, though it again sounds very grim. It is ordinary people like you and me who are always afraid of death, It is the mystic, like Gandhi, who says, I am ready to lay down my life at any time in the service of others. And I think Martin Luther King said the same truth when he said,
if you haven't found a cause, a selfless cause for which to lay down your life, you haven't learned to live. And the point that Thomas A. Kempis is making is, death is going to come. Whether you like it or not, whether I welcome it or not, it is going to come. Then why not lay down our life in the service of others rather than in our own service? When we lay it down in the service of others, we go beyond death. When we try to cling to life for our own personal pleasure, we die over and over again. If thou hadst a good conscience, thou wouldst not greatly fear death. It were better to avoid sin than to fly death. Sin here means living selfishly for oneself. If today thou art not prepared, how will thou be so tomorrow? This is ruthless logic. It says, today you say you don't want to die. How does this sudden readiness to die come? Because it is 3rd September. If here and now we learn to overcome death, then we shall go beyond death and attain immortality. Progress in meditation can always be seen in the lessening fear of death. As our awareness of the unity of life grows deeper and deeper, we shall see that our fear of death becomes less and less. What availeth it to live long when there is so small amendment in our practice? These are all very searching questions that Thomas A. Kempis is raising, because wherever we read the newspapers or magazines on vital statistics, we shall find that life expectation is going up by leaps and bounds, which is very good. But the question is, if life is going to be spent in futility, in the pursuit of pleasure and profit, in making others miserable, I sometimes wonder whether a long life is such a blessing after all. So just because somebody has lived to be 150, it doesn't mean that he has led a very useful life. What does Sir Walter Scott say? Sound the clarion, fill the fife, to all the busy world proclaim, one crowded hour of glorious life is worth an age without a name. I would say one crowded hour of spiritual life. If at any time thou hast seen another man die, make account, thou must also pass the same way. These are very sensitive sentences. Those of us who have seen death, particularly the death of a dear one, it's like a dagger being buried in our heart. Because in our dear one, we are rehearsing our own death. Even in the death of a pet dog or a pet cat, we have this participation in death. There is a terribly moving moment in Somerset Maugham's novel, The Razor's Edge, where the hero, the American young man Larry, sees a comrade lying dead on the battlefield. And he looks at this dead man and says only a very simple thing. He looks so dead when he is dead. This is exactly what we all feel when we look upon somebody who has been laughing and singing and dancing and living, and suddenly lying inert. Very often, great impetus has been given on the spiritual path to very sensitive people who have participated in this kind of death when their dear ones pass away. Thomas A. Kempis, therefore, is asking us, whenever we see death, to remind ourselves of what John Donne used to sing in medieval England. For whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee, it tolls for thee, it tolls for thee. When it is morning, think thou may diest before night. And when evening comes, they are not promised thyself the next morning.
Be thou therefore always in readiness, and so lead thy life that death may never take thee unprepared. This is sound psychology, you know. It is when we walk about afraid of death, here, there, everywhere, that we are tense, anxious, upset. And when we suddenly place ourselves in the arms of the Lord and say, you take me if you want me today, we are free. It's really very sound spiritual psychology that Thomas A. Kempis is giving us in the rather somber language of the medieval monastic tradition. Many die suddenly, and when they look not for it, for the Son of Man will come at an hour when we think not. When that last hour shall come, thou wilt begin to have a far different opinion of thy whole life that is past, and be exceeding sorry thou hast been so careless and remiss. Then shall a good and clear conscience more rejoice a man than all the learning of philosophy. Then will good works avail more than many goodly works. Then a strict life will be more pleasing than all earthly delights. This is again the language of medieval Christianity against the monastic background, which we have to interpret a little more softly and a little more tenderly, because we are rather weak. Here again what is being said is, it is not possible to indulge the senses, to live on the physical level, to live for yourself, and at the same time to live in security, to live in joy, and to live in selfless service. Jesus will say, thou canst not love God and mammon at the same time. And Sri Ramakrishna will say, Rama and Kama, they can't live together in the same room. Either Rama has to go out or Kama has to go out. Here again, most of us have a way of prevaricating at the outset, saying, well, we'll give the big share of the room to Rama and just a little corner with a table and a chair for Kama. He's a harmless fellow who doesn't do anything at all. Yet you give him an inch and he'll take the whole room. And there is only one thing to do with Kama. As Oliver Cromwell is said to have said to the king, in the name of God, go. All therefore is vanity, except to love God and serve him only. For he that loveth God in every one around with all his heart is neither afraid of death, nor of punishment, nor of judgment, nor of hell. Hell here is our own disapproval, our own feeling that we haven't lived to any purpose, our own suspicion that we are wasting our life. This is hell. And to all of us, as we begin to live more and more for those around us and try to give part of our time, talent, and resources to solve the problems of the world to the small extent that is within our power. Every night we go to bed feeling so good, so satisfied that we have spent the day to good account and not wasted it on our own personal profit and personal pleasure. This is very much in consonance with spiritual psychology, that our real self is pure, perfect. And even though all of us commit mistakes in life through our ignorance, neither our purity nor our perfection is ever tarnished. This is what we find in Samadhi, as all the great mystics of all religions testify. And it is sound strategy to look upon all our blemishes, all our drawbacks, as not really belonging to ourselves. It is the mask. And the word personality is related to the word persona, mask. The mask that you and I wear is of selfishness, of self-will, of separateness. In leading the spiritual life, we are enabled through the grace of the Lord to take off this mask and reveal in our daily conduct, in our relationship with everybody, that whatever the provocation, we can return good for evil, love for hatred, or as Jesus adds, bless those that curse us. Labor but now a little, and thou shalt find great rest, yea, perpetual joy. For this spiritual life, there is unremitting effort necessary for a long, long time. And it is this unremitting effort that is at the core of our sadhana, which can lead to the state of abiding joy, which Thomas A. Kempis calls perpetual joy. If thou continuest faithful and fervent in thy work, no doubt, but God will be faithful and liberal in rewarding thee. Thou oughtest to have a good hope of getting the victory, but thou must not be secure, lest thou wax either negligent or proud. That is a very understanding sentence. On the one hand, we shouldn't be cocksure of attaining samadhi and begin our conversation by saying when we attain samadhi. I think it's good spiritual manners to say, if through the grace of the Lord I am enabled to become aware of Him. And on the other hand, it serves no useful purpose also to say, me, I will never attain samadhi. I am imprisoned, born for lifelong enslavement of the ego, and I meditate because everybody else around me meditates. But I will never get there. I am going to be here all the time and say a prayer for me when I get there. And this is the challenge of the spiritual path, where you become neither overconfident nor become diffident, but say, I am going to give my very best. I am going to be ceaselessly vigilant in guarding myself against inflicting any kind of suffering on those around me. And the result of my sadhana, I leave in the hands of the Lord who is within me. Hope in the Lord and do good, said the prophet, and inhabit the land, and thou shalt be fed in the riches thereof. One thing there is that draweth many back from a spiritual progress and the diligent amendment of their lives, extreme fear of the difficulty or the labor of the combat. One of the reasons why the spiritual life seems to appeal very much to the younger people is it gives them an opportunity to use all their restlessness, all their turbulence, which, if it is not channelized, may find an outlet in not very selfless ways. And as our meditation deepens, and as our desire for living for the welfare of others also deepens, we shall find many of our baser passions, meaner cravings, all being burnt up to feed this fire. This is how many of our baser passions, meaner cravings, fiercer aspects of self-will all come to feed this fire that is to consume all that is self-will and separate in us. And I have heard a few people telling me a few years ago that they would never be able to succeed in giving up some of their former attachments. I never argued with them at that time. And the same people who were quite certain that they wouldn't be able to give up some of their former attachments, after 3 or 4 years of meditation, they've given them up freely and even joyful. And later on in the spiritual life, many of the things we cling to as necessary for our personality, and many of the activities we undertake in order to bend other people to our will, we shall begin to give up, not half-heartedly, joyously. The kingdom of God is within you, saith the Lord. Turn thee with thy whole heart unto the Lord, and forsake this wretched world, and thy soul shall find rest. The entire teachings of Jesus the Christ can be summarized in this jewel declaration that the kingdom of heaven is within us. Unfortunately, all of us are conditioned to believe that's just round the corner. When we reach that corner, something within us says, next the other corner. And our life is a pilgrimage around corners. Human incredulity is such that even after rounding 1,000 corners, we still say the 1,001st. That is the corner. As long as we believe that happiness arises when some unknown condition is fulfilled, so long, even when that condition is fulfilled, there will still be the proviso, now let another condition be fulfilled. To me, it appears so obvious that if we can make ourselves happy only because some set of circumstances change, when that particular change comes about, again there is going to be the zest for making the set of circumstances change. In other words, Jesus is a superb psychologist. If here and now we can find joy, security, and fulfillment in living for others, which does bring joy, security, and fulfillment in increasing measure wherever we go, under whatever circumstances we live, we shall find abiding joy. And the irony of it is that it is great spiritual teachers like Jesus who are looked upon as enemies of joy. They are really the only people who know where joy is, here and now. In Samadhi, what we shall find to our delightful discomfort is what we have been looking for all the time. In all the 5 continents, is right here within us.
Some there are that keep themselves in peace and are in peace also with others. These are wonderful sentences. When you are at peace with yourself, you are at peace with everybody else because you know that you and I are one. And the person who is at peace with himself in Shanti is always aware of the Lord who forms the substratum of all existence, from whom we come, in whom we exist, and to whom we return. It is this awareness of the indivisible unity of life that fills our hearts with peace, which nothing can upset, no hostility can agitate. Some there are that keep themselves in peace and are in peace also with others. And there are some that neither are in peace themselves, nor some others to be in peace. They are troublesome to others, but always more troublesome to themselves. That's a very compassionate sentence. People really don't want to trouble others. I don't think there is any human being who really wants to trouble others. When I become a source of trouble to myself,
I don't know what to do. So I say, let me go to George and pour some trouble over his head. When I have poured a big pail of trouble over George's head, George cannot stand himself anymore. So he goes to Bert. And he say, let me pour the whole bucket on Bert. And before we know where we are, all McGee is agitated. And I think it's good for us to remember that nobody really wants to upset others. Nobody really wants to trouble others. When we become troubled ourselves, we don't know what to do, and very often, by talking it out, by embroiling others in our agitation, we think we can get rid of it. My simple suggestion is, instead of agitating yourself more and agitating others more, that's the time go for a long, fast walk in this beautiful weather, repeating Jesus, 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 or Rama, 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 and you will find that the rhythm of breathing, the rhythm of the mantra, and the rhythm of the footstep will quench your anger and generate sympathy and understanding for those who have offended you. And others there are that keep themselves in peace and study to bring others unto peace. When you have succeeded in establishing the peace that passeth all understanding, which is divine grace, within yourself, you know how you have done it. You too have been troubled, you too have been agitated, you too have been torn by passion. And in the light of how you have succeeded in establishing peace in your own heart, in the light of that experience, you can always inspire others to find the same peace within themselves too. Nevertheless, our whole peace in this miserable life consisted rather in humble sufferings than in not feeling adversities. This is again expressed in monastic language. Whenever the medieval mystics say miserable world, awful life, terrible earth, what they are referring to is life as it is lived on the selfish level. After all, who will deny it when we look around today at all the violence that is being unleashed in the world everywhere? Who will deny that life certainly does seem to be not worth the candle, does seem to be a long lurid dream, but life lived on the selfless level for the welfare of others, life lived by turning one's back upon one's own profit and pleasure, prestige and power, is a life of abiding joy, unshaken security, which is the ideal set before us by Jesus, by Krishna, by the Buddha.
He that embraceth Jesus shall stand firmly forever. Love him and keep him for thy friend, who when all go away will not forsake thee, nor suffer thee to perish in the end. If thou seekest Jesus in all things, thou shalt surely find Jesus. But if thou seekest thyself, thou shalt also find thyself but to thine own destruction. For man doth more hurt himself if he seek not Jesus than the whole world and all his adversaries could injure him. When Thomas à Kempis is talking about Jesus here, he is referring to him as the embodiment of abiding joy and eternal love as a divine incarnation. Most of us have some vague resistance when we hear words about God, about the Lord, about the deity, about the Godhead, because our concept is that it is some extraterritorial ruler who issues his fiats from wherever his palace is and expects us to obey them. The attitude of the great mystics of all religions is that the ruler is within you. And we are not obeying orders issued from outside, we are obeying orders issued by ourselves. The practice of meditation and the practice of these great disciplines which go with meditation are enormously difficult and get more and more difficult as you become more and more aware. But once we grasp this simple truth that these are disciplines imposed upon me not by the parliament, but by myself, then there is an acceleration in them. And to most young people, therefore, these disciplines become easy to take to when they are reminded that these are orders issued from within, commands that you are giving your body, your senses, your mind, and your intellect. You may remember the anecdote about the German philosopher Schopenhauer. When he was walking about at midnight, probably propounding some philosophical theory, in a park in Germany, he was naturally arrested, and the parkman asked him who he was. Now, Schopenhauer was a very wise man, so instead of saying, I am Schopenhauer, he said, you want to know who I am? How I wish I knew. This is the answer that Thomas A. Kempis is saying. Do you want to know who you are? You're not your body. You're not your mind. You're not your senses. You're not your intellect. You're not your ego. In you is present the Lord of love, who is present in everyone at the same time. In becoming aware of the Lord within, the unmistakable proof is in becoming aware that all life is one. And this is the real meaning of Christmas, the great festival in the name of Jesus, who is the visible symbol that all life is one. And loving Jesus, in the language of Thomas A. Kempis, means loving our parents more than we do ourselves, loving our partner, loving our children, loving our friends, and let's never forget loving our enemies as well. Blessed is he that understandeth what it is to love Jesus, to love all, and to despise himself for Jesus' sake. Thou oughtest to leave thy beloved, for that Jesus will be loved alone above all things. One of the striking developments in meditation is that we are able to recall our capacity, our immense capacity to love, which has been misdirected into petty, personal channels of profit and pleasure, power and prestige. By reading books, by arguing it out, by weighing pros and cons, it's not possible. We all know that it is not possible to withdraw our love from smoking or drinking or drugs through any intellectual manipulation. Sri Ramakrishna, the great mystic of the latter part of the 19th century in India, gives us the perfect recipe for recalling our love from objects not worthy of being loved. He says, if 6 people try to pull off a frond from a coconut palm, it is so firmly fixed and attached to the trunk that they will not be able to pull it off at all. As soon as a new frond begins to come, the old frond will fall away effortlessly. If thou seekest Jesus in all things,
thou shalt surely find Jesus. This is the way to find Jesus the Christ, to look for him in everyone around us by forgetting ourselves. But if thou seekest thyself, thou shalt also find thyself, but to thine own destruction. Thomas A. Kempis concludes with a great crescendo. He says, the more you think about yourself, the more you go after your own profit, the more you impose your will upon others, the weaker and weaker you will become, and the more and more insecure you will continue. For man doth more hurt himself if he seek not Jesus than the whole world and all his adversaries could injure him.
When Jesus is present, all is well and nothing seems difficult. But when Jesus is absent, everything is hard. When the great mystics talk about Jesus Christ or Krishna or the Buddha, they are not talking about any person outside. They are talking about someone who is within us, nearer to ourselves than our body, dearer to ourselves than our heart, more precious to ourselves than our very life. There is a general tendency when the word Lord or God is mentioned, immediately to resist the concept of being dominated by some external force. All these misunderstandings disappear completely when we remember that the Christ or Krishna or the Buddha is right within ourselves as our real self. So when we are talking about the Lord, all resistance ceases if we remember that we are talking about someone who is our innermost self. And the Sanskrit word for the Lord is Ishvara, he who rules us from inside all the time. See, this is to remind us if somebody says, I don't believe in God or in the Lord, there is no need for us to get agitated at all. Do you believe in yourself? If you do believe in yourself, you are a believer in God. Do you want joy? If you want joy, you are a believer in Rama. If you want love, you are a believer in Krishna. If you want selfless service, you are a believer in Christ. And if you want to wake up, you are a believer in the Buddha. These are all different terms, and there is no need for anybody to criticize others just because they say we are agnostic or we don't believe in this particular incarnation or in that particular religion. It is preferable to have all the world against us rather than to have Jesus, our own self, offended with us. Amongst all, therefore, that be dear unto us, let Jesus alone be specially beloved. Love all for Jesus, but Jesus for himself. Jesus Christ alone is singularly to be beloved, who alone is found good and faithful above all friends. For him and in him, let as well friends as foes be dear unto thee, and all these are to be prayed for, that he should make them all to know and love him. In using the word here, love so many times, I think it is again good to remind us, it is very difficult to learn to love. In order to say that I love you, I should be in a position to put your happiness first and last under all circumstances. But it's not also easy to receive love. This is an aspect about which we haven't talked very much. When we took mother and the children 2 or 3 days ago to see a delightful children's ballet, The Nutcracker Suite. We were very delighted with the grace of movement, the costumes. Only I couldn't help wishing that the music were a little less loud. But my mother was particularly remarking that even when a bouquet of flowers was being presented to one of the characters, it would be received so gracefully. You and I, if somebody were unfortunately to present a bouquet to her, we'll do that, go away. And the way they received it, oh boy, the girls were showing it at the home, dropping a curtsy and bowing and being very graceful. To receive love is like that, you know. Most of us, we don't know how to receive love. We get embarrassed. We are quite comfortable to be disliked because, but when somebody begins to love us, it is not at all easy to receive all this love. And Thomas A. Kempis says, the one person who can receive all your love without embarrassment, very gracefully, is the Lord. Recently, in the San Francisco Chronicle, I was reading a very interesting item with little photographs of people from the streets being interviewed, and the question was, have you been ever involved in a lopsided love affair? There are little pictures, you know, of all kinds of people from all walks of society, and if you can see my little picture at the bottom, here is my answer. All of us are involved in a lopsided love affair where the Lord is the Lord. He keeps on sending valentines. We won't even open them, you know. We just throw them into the waste paper basket. He keeps ringing us. We pick it up and say, wrong call. Everywhere he is telling us, right from within, I love you, I love you, I love you. And we make ourselves so deaf as to remind us of the words of Jesus. There are none so deaf as those who will not hear. We are not prepared to hear. We try our very best to turn our back upon this incorrigible lover to whom we reveal all our ugliness, you know. But he still keeps on saying, I don't care whether you are ugly, I don't care whether you are selfish, I don't care whether you are self-willed, I just cannot stop loving you. And it is this discovery that we make at the end of the tunnel, that we bore through meditation into the depths of consciousness, that there is this divine lover. Call him Krishna, call him Christ, call him the Buddha, call him Allah, who is ever present in the depths of us. His message to all of us is, if you love me, don't ever inflict any suffering upon anybody. Not only that, very often in life, when we are faced with situations where there are people attacking us, forces raised against us violently, the great mystics are unanimous that it is divine for me to suffer myself and bear it patiently rather than inflict suffering upon others. When past memories torment us or present situations provoke us, the very best way in which we can transform ill will into goodwill, hatred into love, is to go out for a long, brisk, fast walk, repeating Rama, 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 Jesus, Jesus, Hail Mary, Baruch Atah Adonai, Om Mani Padmeham, or Allahu Akbar. Please select one mantram and stick to it all the time. Wherever you get a chance, waiting in the restaurant, waiting in the post office, waiting for the bus,
waiting for your girlfriend or boyfriend, keep repeating the mantra, Rama, 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 Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And as the bank advertisement says, it all adds up. Great spiritual capital is not usually done in the savings account. There are very few people on the spiritual path who can open a savings account where there is an irreducible minimum. Most of us are spiritual paupers, so we don't have the initial capital to start with. For us, checkings, a few pennies here, a few pennies there. Somebody calls you some unkind name, you say Rama, Rama, Rama. A few pennies in. Somebody tries to put a spoke in your bicycle wheel, you say Jesus, Jesus, some more pennies in. It is through these innumerable little acts of unremembered kindnesses that spiritual awareness grows. It's not, you don't just shoot up like, who is that, Jack's Beanstalk? Overnight through the roof, you see. You grow little by little. People looking at you say, he's still the same size, the same height, hasn't grown at all for the last few years. But you got your tape in your pocket, you go 1 millimeter. And over a long, long period, spiritual awareness grows through these innumerable little acts of patience, of forgiveness, of putting the welfare of others first, of turning your back upon your own convenience, your own comfort, so that you may ensure the convenience and comfort of others. My son, hear my words, words of greatest sweetness, surpassing all the knowledge of the philosophers and wise men of this world. My words are spirit and life, and not to be weighed by the understanding of man. In the Upanishads, a vital distinction is made by the sages between two kinds of knowledge. Intellectual knowledge, which is called apara, and spiritual wisdom, which is called para. There is no attempt here to deprecate the importance of intellectual knowledge, which is necessary for ensuring the reasonable comforts of life. But intellectual knowledge cannot enable us to realize God, because the intellectual mode of knowing is finite, driven by the duality of subject and object. And spiritual wisdom has the inescapable effect of making us less selfish, less self-will, and less separate. In order to assess our progress on the spiritual path, the simple evidence of our relationships with those around us is infallible. And we don't have to ask anybody else how we are doing on the spiritual path. We have only to look carefully at how much patience we are able to show, how much sympathy we are able to show, and how much capacity we have developed even to return love for hatred. Even if you are meditating morning, day and night, if you haven't developed more patience, particularly to bear with those who tend to irritate you, and more sympathy for those who are perhaps prone to anger and prone to making demands upon you, I would say, without any hesitation, that there is plenty of room for improvement in your meditation. And I get a little chagrined when I read in some of the occult journals that come to us how
Progress in meditation can be measured by the voices that you hear, by the visions that you see, by the aura that you are able to perceive about people. And on the strength of my own small experience, all this belongs to Alice's Wonderland. The simple, down-to-earth, infallible test of our spiritual growth is to be seen in our capacity to find our security within ourselves without depending upon external paraphernalia, and using this newfound security to return kindness for unkindness, goodwill for ill will, particularly in the agitating intimacies of family relationship. They are not to be drawn forth for vain approbation, but to be heard in silence, and to be perceived with all humility and great affection. The value of spiritual advice has very little to do with the applause that we give it or with the approbation we give it. We can test the value of spiritual advice only by practicing it. Some of these statements that the great mystics of all religions place before us are so simple that we cannot really imagine with our complicated intellectual processes that something so simple can have such long-lasting effects. My son, thou art not yet a courageous and considerate lover. Wherefore sayest thou this, O Lord? Because for a slight opposition thou givest over thy undertakings, and too eagerly seekest consolation. A courageous lover standeth firm in temptations, and giveth no credit to the crafty persuasions of the enemy. As I place him in prosperity, so in adversity I am not unpleasant to him. The salient feature of all love is that it never changes. Shakespeare will go to the extent of saying, call it not love that changeth under any circumstances. And it is for this reason that I often point out that when we use the word love by saying we love this person or that person, we should be careful to understand that such love should not undergo any change whatever the circumstances in which we find ourselves or our partner to be. Similarly, the love of God has also to withstand the test of time, place, and circumstance. All of us need joy in life, and all of us do get frequent opportunities for tasting the joy that comes out of love. But sorrow too, unfortunately, seems to be necessary for our growth and our education. I often used to ask my spiritual teacher, my grandmother, why the Lord who loves us infinitely should teach us through sorrow, and her practical answer was, do you think you can learn in any other way? This is very cruel, but it's a very sad comment on most of us, that this is the only way in which we can learn. Even in little things, for example, overeating. If there weren't certain unpleasant consequences in our digestive system, people will start having, those who are fond of food, they'll start having 6 meals a day instead of 3. Similarly, overindulgence in other senses, even anger. After a while, to become angry hurts us. Our blood pressure goes up, our nervous system becomes tense, and people who cannot be persuaded to control their temper in any other way, you only need to remind them that their blood pressure is shooting up. It helps to remember that they should keep themselves under control. And it's good for us to remember that it is because the Lord loves us that He makes it very uncomfortable for us to be angry, very uncomfortable for us to be resentful, very uncomfortable for us to be afraid. This is again a very loving way in which the Lord is teaching us, love and be healthy, hate and be unhealthy, forgive and be beautiful, be resentful and be ugly. That the longings and desires of our hearts are to be examined and moderated. Almost all of us believe that when a desire comes up in our mind for anything, it has to be satisfied. And particularly in the early days of our life, we are not even aware that it is often the desire picking us up, holding us aloft, and throwing us away. And I feel a great sense of affection and sympathy for the teenager who is very often in this condition of being picked up, held aloft, and thrown away. And he is in a sense at the mercy of his glands. And it's good, therefore, particularly in dealing with teenagers, never to ridicule them, look upon them as undesirable. And if we can remember that it takes a long, long time of strenuous, heroic endeavor to be able to govern our desires to such an extent that now you pick up your desire, hold it aloft and throw it away if it is undesirable. And it can be done by constant practice, drawing upon the power released in meditation. This very exhilarating achievement can be reached by every one of us, however ordinary we may be. As we draw upon the power of our meditation and begin slowly to resist small desires, which often come to us as a craving of the palate or as a desire to acquire some needless article. We can slowly start resisting these desires in our daily life on a small level. To think of challenging the ego on the very first day of our meditation, we get up and say, "Where are you?" He will just laugh at you and say, "You're not a foeman worthy of my steel. I've got cohorts of little hobgoblins, which you have to conquer first. Then, when you have proved your worth by vanquishing millions of my mercenaries, then you issue a challenge and I'll pick up the gauntlet if you're really worthy of the fight." And to take on the ego immediately is impossible for anyone except Jesus or the Buddha. And for us, the training for this final encounter with our mortal foe, whose armor is our selfishness, impenetrable, and whose weapons are pride, fear, and lust. In order, therefore, to challenge him, we have to train ourselves every day in our relationships at home and in the community. And you can see how absurd it is for people to drop out of society, to turn their back upon their home, to leave their college, or to quit their job, which is the training ground. This is a big gymnasium where you go and get into your gym shorts and work at it every day. And I cannot imagine, for the vast majority of very ordinary people like me, the possibility of even leading the spiritual life with some measure of success, except in the daily loving context at home and in our work and at play. Desire, the word that is used by Thomas A. Kempis, is really the raw material of love. Our modern psychology probably hasn't seen the connection which the great mystics have seen between the capacity to desire and the capacity to love. For example, a person who is desiring money intensely, he is giving this love to money. And such a person who is pursuing money is not likely to be able to love his family or society or anybody else. There's no point in blaming him because his love has been imprisoned in money. And if we could release it out of money, it is again the capacity to love people which comes back to his service. My son, it is needful for thee still to learn many things more, which thou hast not yet even well learned. What are these, O Lord? It is the Lord within who is teaching us that thou frame thy desires wholly according to my good pleasure, and that thou be not a lover of thyself, but an earnest follower of my will. Whenever we have desires, we have the choice of either carrying out those desires to fulfill them or saying no very quietly but very firmly to them. Various longings and desires oftentimes inflame thee and drive thee forwards with vehemence, but do thou consider whether thou be not moved rather for thine own advantage than for my honor. In yielding to such cravings, little by little, what we are losing is our freedom. And there is no sensory satisfaction that is worth even a millionth part of our freedom. Sometimes, however, thou must use violence against one's own self-will and resist manfully thy sensual appetite, not regarding what the flesh would or would not, but rather taking pains that even perforce it may be made subject to the spirit. When we are training ourselves every day in saying yes to selfless desires and saying no to selfish desires, there comes an occasion when a big wave, say of anger, or what's very closely connected with it, lust, comes up. Formerly you wouldn't know until you were picked up and riding on the wave and being shot through the tube. This is the language of surfing. It's only when you come out of the tube you see that you know that you've been surfing. And most of us don't know when we are getting angry. And when we become thoroughly angry, there's nothing that we can do at that time.
And in the practice of meditation, gradually you learn to see the wave far off, just as a white line. And you know what it is going to be. But you see the white line and you immediately get ready, you flex your muscle, take a few deep breaths and jump about a little to limber up your limbs. And then you stick your chest out and say, I'm ready. You have time. And as the wave comes, particularly anger and lust, bigger and bigger, instead of being frightened, there's a sense of exaltation in you. You just can't wait. Why come so slowly? Come on. And it's when you read the great mystics, they will inspire you with the joy of this fight, which is the only fight worth fighting in the world. As the Buddha puts it, he who has fought against 10,000 others, he has only made 10,000 more enemies. He who has vanquished himself, he has no enemies at all. And isn't it Napoleon Bonaparte who says, walking on the sands of the prison island, there is only one conquest that abides, self-conquest.
My son, take it not grievously if some think ill of thee, and speak that which thou wouldst not willingly hear. As long as we consider ourselves as separate fragments, there cannot but arise occasions when we will look upon somebody else as encroaching on our preserves. In other words, until we learn to see the unity that underlies all life, there is always the possibility for even the best of us to come into clash with other people, with other races, with other nations. It is a little disquieting, for example, to see how war is often waged in the name of great causes. But even in personal estrangements, high ideological differences are often quoted to cover up what is essentially a conflict of self-interest or self-will. Intellectual differences can often arouse people to long-standing estrangement when it is used to cover up the clash of self-will. Christine was reminding me yesterday very delightfully about an old song. It was a beautiful morning when we went to have a walk on Dillon Beach, and both of us got a little poetical, which doesn't happen to us very often. And she was recalling a song that many of you may have heard. Oh, what a beautiful morning, what a beautiful day, what a wonderful morning, everything is going my way. It shows you where all I get my material from. And see, this is our concept of everything going well because it is going my way. People would probably look upon this as a very moving song to be sung on special occasions, at reunions. And to me, as I look through the eyes of the great mystics, it is a very tragic song. It isn't a beautiful day when everything is going my way. It's a beautiful day when everything is going everybody's way. When everyone is happy, when everyone is secure, when everyone is trying to live selflessly, oh, it's a beautiful day. If there is one person who is suffering in our midst, it is our suffering, and it is our sacred duty to try to relieve it. It is the compassionate Buddha who will say in one of his most glorious statements, I will not make the final crossing into nirvana until the last creature on earth is free. If there is somebody who is being exploited in our midst, we are also being exploited. We are a party to exploitation. And I find it very difficult to appreciate the current concept of being allowed to do our own thing. It is a luxury none of us can afford. If thou dost walk inwardly, thou wilt not much weigh fleeting words outwardly. I think just a decision not to be agitated is not going to be of much help. It's good to make a decision that we will try to be patient under all circumstances, but once our passions are involved and once there is a clash of self-will, afterwards the intellect is not operative, particularly on the academic campus, on which I have lived for many years. Some of the most fierce discussions begin in such a Platonic spirit. All tranquility, all serenity, basically speaking. I agree with you. This is how they start. And towards the end, you'll see sparks flying like 4th of July fireworks in the atmosphere. I must confess that I am not too much in favor of what are called eyeball-to-eyeball encounter groups, because I very much go in the Jesus tradition. Bless them that curse you. Do good to them that harm you. This helps you to get strong. This helps the other person also to get strong. And in some of these encounter groups, even though there may be a little temporary relief when you have used all the words that you didn't even know that you knew, in attacking the other person, there may be a temporary relief. They call it, what do they call it? Getting it off the chest. And see, I can understand, though, when you come out, oh yes, oh, you feel so good and you feel so free until the other man comes again close to you and contradicts you. All the relief and all this freedom that we are talking about cannot be permanent, because the spiritual law enunciated by the compassionate Buddha, hatred does not cease by hatred at any time. Hatred ceases by love, and the only answer to violence is non-violence. Violence, whether in words or deeds, begets more violence. This is true as much between individuals as it is on the international level. It is no small prudence to keep silence in an evil time, and inwardly to turn thyself to me, and not to be troubled by the judgment of men. In our home, for example, even if there is one person who has this kind of inner strength, he can act as a kind of stabilizer to the whole home. When I was coming first to America 12 years ago on a P&O one-class liner, it was monsoon on the Arabian Sea and the waves were rising high. One moment you would be seeing the sky, another moment you would be seeing the sea. And most people got seasick because of this constant swing of sea and sky. And when we got on board Queen Elizabeth, because I came in royal style here 12 years ago, this did not take place very much because we were told what are called stabilizers. Now, this is what happens in a home when everybody is weak, when everybody is vindictive, the home goes like that. But if there is one person, the father or the mother, even the son or the daughter, who is a little patient, who can be a little persuasive, and who has a little strength, it stabilizes the whole boat of the home. In other words, it's not necessary for everybody, including your brother-in-law and your country cousin, to be all stable. Even one person in a home can keep the home stable. And one of the expressions that I have picked up here is people who are agitated and who retaliate, they rock the boat all the time. In other words, every one of us should therefore try to act as a stabilizer. It's not only a matter of our own stability. In acting with patience and compassion, we help others also to find the same stability in themselves. Let not thy peace be in the tongues of men, for whether they interpret well or ill of thee, thou art not therefore another man. This is a strong talk, because in order to do anything that is worthwhile in life for the benefit of others, we may often have to face a certain amount of criticism from those who are dear and near to us, and a certain amount of opposition from people who use accepted norms of judgment to look at people. Where are true peace and true glory? Are they not in me? The one person whose appreciation we should always look for and try to win is the Lord who is in ourselves. In the language of school, it is He who signs our progress report. Every morning done very well. That's what really should make us gratified and give us the incentive to make even a better effort tomorrow. Instead of, therefore, depending upon the praise of other people who will praise us as long as they are pleased, but who will censure us when they are displeased. And he that neither coveteth to please men, nor feareth to displease them, shall enjoy much peace. That is why I said it's strong counsel. Sometimes we are so eager to please, which is a good quality as long as in pleasing others we are helping them. But sometimes when somebody is going the wrong way, to please that person and saying, you're just on the right road, have a good day's driving. And the great mystics say, this is an illusion. My son, I am the Lord that giveth strength in the day of tribulation. Most of us are prone to believe that in times of sorrow and suffering, we can get consolation from outside. Even when we are restless, for example, we are under the impression that by changing our place of residence, or changing our job, or changing our friendships, it is possible for us to find peace. As long as we believe that peace lies outside us, as long as we believe that security is to be found outside the great mystics ever, we will never be able to find peace. We will never be able to find security. When in times of sorrow we want to console ourselves, to strengthen ourselves and to support ourselves, the source of consolation and strength and support should be looked for within ourselves. Come thou unto me when it is not well with thee. Who except a great lover would say this? Even in the most intimate relationships, even in the relationship between a boyfriend and a girlfriend, it is very seldom that a boyfriend can remain steadfast when his girlfriend is irritated or is in a depression. It takes boundless love on the part of the Lord to say, I understand when you are happy if you don't come to me.
When everything is going well with you, I understand why you forget me. But when things are wrong with you, when the clouds are gathering large and looming dark on the horizon, why don't you come to me? I will never say time server, making a piece of convenience of me, expediency is your watchword. I won't say anything. What great love brings you to me when you have no other go. Yeah. And one of the names for Krishna, which I jocularly have coined, is the last resort. See, no human being worthy of any self-respect will accept this as a namesake, but we can call Jesus the last resort. We can call Krishna the last resort, which is the meaning of refuge. And in the Bhagavad Gita, over and over again, Sri Krishna will flood us with love by saying, when everything has failed, when your bank has gone bankrupt and your bar has gone bankrupt, and when all friends have forsaken you, and when not even your dog will wag his tail for your sake, even then you come to me, I will never twit you. What has happened to your bank? What has happened to your bar? Even your dog is not prepared to stay with you. I will never say that. I'll say, what a warm-hearted devotee. So dependable when everything is going wrong. So it conveys as no words can convey the real nature of love, that Jesus is saying to us through Thomas à Kempis, now your need is greatest. It is when your need is greatest that the Lord says, I will come to you. This is that which most of all hindereth heavenly consolation, that thou art too slow in turning thyself unto prayer. Even those who get interested in meditation and interested in the spiritual life, things have a knack of happening just when they are about to sit down to meditation. An old friend calls and says, there is something new going on in Lake Tahoe. Or the flamingo has got a new shining star there, and you say, well, after all, we have wasted 25 years. Why not have one more trip to Tahoe, or where is the flamingo? This is how we go on. See, and even Saint Augustine, one of the great giants of the ancient world, even Saint Augustine would say, when illumination was about to dawn upon him, not today, Lord. Tonight let me paint Alexandria red. Tomorrow morning I'll sit down in meditation and go into samadhi. And if we are really to bring an end to our sorrow, it is good for us to turn to the Lord today with all our problems, with all our difficulties, and with all our handicaps. For before thou dost earnestly supplicate me, thou seekest in the meanwhile many comforts, and refreshest thyself in outward things. He is describing you and me to a T. But do thou, having now recovered breath after the tempest, gather strength again in the light of my mercies. For I am at hand to repair all, not only entirely, but also abundantly and in most plentiful measure. One of the great miracles of spiritual healing is that you become stronger than you were before you were struck down. It's a miracle which we can verify in our own life by turning to the Lord of love, who is within us as the supreme healer. Is there anything hard to me? Or shall I be like one that saith and doeth not? I think he's teasing us. He says, you're prepared
to trust a miracle drug. If you find a very enthusiastic review of a drug in the Lancet, you go with complete faith in it. Don't you think I am a little more trustworthy?
When thou thinkest thyself farthest off from me, oftentimes I am nearest unto thee. In moments of trouble, most of us have a tendency, is a unanimous declaration in all the sacred scriptures of all the great religions, that the supreme goal of life, which is God realization, cannot be attained very easily, very quickly, without a complete commitment to the spiritual life. Jesus, for example, will say, "Thou shalt love the Lord with all thy heart and all thy strength and all thy mind and all thy spirit." The main purpose of meditation is to provide us with a mighty tool by which we can unify all our desires, which are vociferously flowing into innumerable wasteful channels without our being aware of it at all. In one of the tremendous outbursts in the Upanishads, the sages will say, "You are what your deep driving desire is. As your deep driving desire is, so is your will. As your will is, so is your deed. As your deed is, so is your destiny." This is why, in spite of all the achievements of our modern civilization, which has made some contribution to making life comfortable, we seem to be unable to deal with the great problems of anger, fear, conflict, and war. I don't think by any other process than the spiritual can we ever live in peace and harmony on earth. As Jesus will say, this is entering the kingdom of heaven within. Little by little, we shall see, as our meditation progresses, that our cravings for lesser things gradually fall away. This is one of the most beautiful features of meditation to me, that our cravings for pizzas and pancakes and crepes and flaming sucettes, they just leave us and go away. There is no titanic struggle waged between the crepe and us, or between the pizza and us, which is a tremendous waste of energy. I am well able to reward thee above all measure and degree. Thou shalt not long toil here, nor always be oppressed with griefs. Wait a little while, and thou shalt see a speedy end of thine evils. There will come an hour when all labor and trouble shall cease. Poor and brief is all that which passeth away with time. For some years in the practice of meditation, it's all so difficult. We seem to be making no progress at all. In fact, there have been people who have told me, "You've been meditating for 4 years, 5 years, and 6 years, and we are still where we are. We don't seem to be making any progress at all." So I often point out that from the day we start meditation, we are making progress in the very depths of our consciousness. But for many years, this progress seems to be subterranean in the deeper levels of consciousness. There's a tremendous amount of resoluteness and of patience and of sticking with it, or as you call it, plugging at it.
The spiritual life is essentially infinite plugging at it. You just keep on meditating every morning when you would rather stay longer in bed, particularly with the weather being cold and the day being rainy. There is a natural temptation, why not skip one morning? In Bengal, the home state of Sri Ramakrishna, they often say, in order to make up for one morning's skipping meditation, we need 1 week. So if we skip 1 week, we need 7 weeks ad infinitum. I think there is an Italian mystic who says beautifully that in order to stay where you are on meditation, you've got to keep running. That's very Italian. You've got to keep on making the very best efforts, and one of the very, very important aspects of the spiritual life of our young people in Ramagiri, which I appreciate very much, is this capacity to stick to it, to plug at it, rain or shine, whatever happens. One day meditation may go on like a breeze. Oh, you're so up in the air, you can hardly be brought down to earth. You're talking all the time about we're just on the verge of samadhi. It's only, even they ask for congratulations in advance. Now, when meditation is going like a breeze, as they say, that's the time, please don't get elated. On the following day, it may go like a storm. If you get elated over meditation when it is easy, you cannot help getting deflated when meditation is difficult. So when meditation is going on well, don't gloat on it, bask in it. And when meditation is not going well, don't brood on it. It is maintaining this even keel in meditation that enables us to face the ups and downs of meditation with equanimity. Later on, after some years, when a tremendous experience bursts out in the depths of our consciousness, as Sri Ramakrishna would say, you'll feel that you're like a fish swimming in a sea of light. This is an experience which the human body is not meant to contain. The human body and the human senses are meant for 3 senses of pleasure, 4 senses of pleasure. If you want to be extreme, a nickel of pleasure. This is all the capacity of the physical body. And when a tremendous overpowering spiritual experience in which infinite joy is packed, in which infinite fulfillment is packed, takes place, the poor body says, I cannot take it, and it swoons. The senses say, we cannot take it, they close down. The mind says, this is too much. It just, what do you call it? Folds up. And the ego, he says, this is terrible. And it dies. Now, this is the supreme experience of samadhi where Sri Ramana Maharshi, one of the greatest sages who has ever blessed this earth in human history, who was with us in India until 1950 in the body, after attaining samadhi, he had broken out of the physical prison and become one with all life. When Sri Ramana Maharshi was about to shed his body in 1950, when little people like me moaned with a heart breaking and said, you're going away, you're leaving us. His marvelous answer was, where can I go away? I am in everybody. How can I leave you? I am in everybody. This is what is true of all of us. This is the discovery that we have to make, that I am present in all of you, you are present in all of us, and it is this that is the basis of living in peace and harmony everywhere, regarding all people as our brothers and sisters. Thou shalt not long toil here, nor always be oppressed with griefs. Wait a little while,
and thou shalt see a speedy end of thine evils. There will come an hour when all labor and trouble shall cease. After many years of serious spiritual disciplines, the practice of meditation on the one hand, and the intelligent restraint of the senses on the other, when we attain the unity of state, become aware that the Lord is present in all of us, and live in complete harmony with this vision, then there is no more effort. Then there is no more wailing and gnashing of teeth. Why do we have to meditate every morning? Why do we have to restrain our senses? After many years of arduous labor, through the grace of the Lord, the day will come when all effort will fall away. When we don't meditate just in the morning, we are meditating all the time. We are always aware of the Lord, even in our sleep. We have a pilot friend who used to tell me that for the plane to take off, 747 for example, requires a tremendous lot of fuel and a tremendous burst of energy to get the plane off the ground. And to get the ego off the ground, not even the jumbo jet is so difficult. It's worse than the jumbo jet. To blast it off, you require, I suppose, the power of this Apollo 13 or 14 or 15. That's why in the early days, you just can't rise above physical egocentric consciousness. After many years of sadhana and through the grace of the Lord, when we have been set in our orbit, going round the Lord every day, this is a mighty cosmic journey on which all of us are going to be astronauts and cosmonauts, and when we see somebody, we'll say, "Hi, Steve, how's your orbit?" Steve will say, "This is tremendously more joyous than visiting Iceland or Goa." Says, now everything is joy, everything is beauty, because we see the vision of life as one. So our pilot friend would say, once the plane has gotten to its flight, then he used to say, it's all cruising. Oh, you can put your feet up, and you've got to keep an eye now and then on the instrument panel to see that in an air pocket, you don't suddenly go down. Occasionally you've got to look at the instrument panel, but there is no effort at all. Similarly, when we have become aware of the Lord, occasionally we have to watch the ego, once in a way, to see it doesn't lapse in absent-mindedness into some of its old ways. But generally speaking, you can ignore it. Then it is that life becomes spontaneous. Do in earnest what thou doest. Labor faithfully in my vineyard. I'll be thy recompense. Simple words. Do earnestly. See, these are some of the very important words of the mystics are very simple. Jesus, he never liked postponement. He never liked, what do they say? The street of by and by leads to the road of never. This is the secret of spiritual success. The person who will say, today I'm going to start meditation. Today I'm going to restrain my senses intelligently. Today I'm going to start putting the welfare of others first. He's going to go a long, long way. All of us are going to have lapses. All of us are going to fall down. All that we are expected to do by the Lord is pick ourselves up, brush off, and start walking. Forward, forward, forward. Do in earnest what thou doest. Labor faithfully in my vineyard. I will be thy recompense. Money and power and prestige and material possession, these are not going to satisfy us. The Lord says,
I will give myself to you. Peace shall come in one day, which is known unto the Lord, and it shall not be day nor night, but unceasing light, infinite brightness, steadfast peace, and secure rest. In other words, it is not our problem when Samadhi is going to take place. When the Lord is going to reveal himself to us, this is on his calendar. We don't have to put it down on our calendar. By getting more and more impatient for the unity of state, for becoming aware of the Lord, we are only agitating the mind more and more. This is the delicate artistry of the spiritual life. On the one hand, you try with all your earnestness, you strive with all your might to follow the shining goal, but on the other hand, you don't get entangled so much in the impatient anticipation of results. When we want the Lord with all our heart and all our strength, we are prepared to wait for him for ever and ever if necessary. And it is this capacity that should be combined on the one hand with complete earnestness of sadhana, and on the other hand, complete patience with the actual spiritual experience.